As I said, my name is Nick Majuli. I'm the COO at Ritholtz Wealth Management, and we're going to start with the first panel today on attracting and retaining the next gen of talent for the financial services industry. So I want to bring out two individuals. First, the president and CEO of the CFA Institute. She has 30 years experience in the wealth management and asset management industry, Margaret Franklin. And we have another president and CEO with us, who's the president and CEO of the American College of Financial Services and also a former regulator, George Nichols. So to start this discussion, I want to start with some data, and then I'm going to have you guys kind of react to it a little bit. So the financial advisory space is 70% male with an average age of 44, and only about 10% of advisors are 30 or younger. Given this, what do you see as the most pressing challenges in attracting younger and more diverse talent to the industry? Mark, do you want to start first?
Great. Well, it is just a real pleasure to be here. And I would say maybe one step to attracting diverse talent is kind of what's going on here and the thoughtfulness behind what is a really exciting and fun place. If I must admit, as a woman, and at 30%, you're doing better than the asset management business, where we've got about 20%. The most important decision is what you're going to wear on the stage when sundress doesn't seem quite appropriate. So a couple things. First of all, I was recently talking to the chairman of one of the largest financial institutions globally and one of the biggest wealth management firms, one of the big wealth management divisions. And he said, our average client is 59. Our average advisor is 57. We have a serious problem. Combined with AI, changing demands from clients, it's a tsunami. Now, you can look at that and say that's really overwhelming, or you can look at it as a significant opportunity. And while the industry is trying to look at all types of diversity, and why? Because, better systems have diverse talent, diverse experience. But for those starting with women, which is 50% of the population, it's not only that there's only 30%, but they're not in the revenue-generating dimensions in those roles, and they're not in the C-suite. And all of our work shows that actually when you don't have a diverse system, you probably have a cultural barrier. And it's not intentional. In fact, generally speaking, it's quite subconscious. So, the best thing is to think about what's your value proposition? Are you informed about what new talent is looking for? And then most importantly, in your organization, do you have the types of practices that welcome those 30-somethings, under 30s, 30s to 40s? You need experience to be able to manage clients' wealth well. So you can't shortcut the work that needs to be done, but we need to explain our business in a much more compelling, attractive way. And everywhere I go, this is a real dearth. The best talent is not coming into this industry, and yet this industry is growing.
Great answers. I assume this is working.
It is.
Okay, good. It's not. Can you all hear me? No, you
Just hand it back and forth. We have two working mics, folks. We're trying up here.
First, I have to say everything that Mark said is correct. And I always start by answering this with culture trumps everything. It trumps strategy. It trumps everything. And if you don't create the right culture that attracts young people, women, really knowledgeable men, is not going to matter. So you've got to really, as she mentioned, you've got to really get the culture down. That's the first thing. The second thing is that when I think of women and people of color, they've had very little exposure to the world in which we live in. I will tell you that I sent a photograph from my room to my adult kids and says, this is where your dad's going, to speak. And they were like, are you at some tech event? And I'm like, no, I'm at a financial service event. Well, why aren't you on a golf course? And I'm like, well, no, that's not the case. But the fact is, what we are exposing them to is this. I mean, there are so many opportunities. There are so many jobs. There are so many skills. And this is actually a cool industry to be in. You can have an impact, which is important to them. You can make money. but you can grow and experience things that are just amazing. And so I think those are things. The other thing I think is really important is structurally how we run our organizations, regardless of what role it is. We're going to have to rethink that for the next generation. Whether it's compensation, whether it's how you're onboarding, we're going to have to really look internally beyond just culture. Structurally, what is the system we're bringing them to, and how are we helping them be successful in that regard?
Thank you. So, George, I know you just, as you just mentioned, about whether the current system is prepared for these demographic changes. Could you elaborate more on some of those aspects, like compensation or anything else in there? What?
Sure. So two things. I want to talk about compensation, and I want to talk about retention, really more on the advisor side. So I've gone to college. I've either had my family, my parents pay for it, or I have student loans. And then you're going to tell me that I'm going to be an advisor, and depending on the structure I walk in, I'll eat what I kill. And then you can tell me I can get another job where I have 60 grand a year, 70 grand a year, plus benefits. Which job would you take? So when we think about it, if we don't rethink the compensation structure for them to understand it and really, again, expose them to all the different roles that they could get into, we're going to have a challenge. The second thing is this retention issue. And when I look at retention, here's what I struggle with. So if you look at advisors today, there's about 325,000, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, in the financial services space, and 1/3 of them are going to retire in the next 10 years. All right? 1/3 is going to retire. Now, with that retirement cliff, and then the retention rate for our industry, financial advisors, is 72%. The math doesn't work. So here's the premise that I believe in. We have failed white men. Now, when I say that, my brothers and sisters come and say, what the hell, you don't need to say that, George. Leave that alone, okay? But the reality is we have. Think about it. We say every day that this is a white man's industry, and yet 72% leave the business within the first 3 to 4 years. So if you think that we're doing that in the industry that we say it is just for them, why would you think when we create a system and say we're going to recruit women and people of color, that somehow or another we're going to get a different outcome? So imagine if we rethought this and said, how would we create an environment, a structure that would be compelling and interesting for women and people of color? They come into the business and they succeed in the business. Guess what? You're also going to improve the opportunities for white males. Now, we've never thought about it that way because we get so hung up on what we're trying to bring in. But I firmly believe that the reality is here that if we don't address the retention, it doesn't matter what happens, whether it's women or people of color coming in. Again, we fail white men, so we need to fix the whole system to make it work so that we have more people in the business.
Yeah, Mark, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think actually George and I, when we were preparing with you, Nick, for this conversation, we actually both have the same data that shows this. So it's how do you create a properly diverse ecosystem, properly diverse industry that has the right practices to get the best people in, regardless of where they look. And as you know, our clients are changing dramatically, much more dramatically and quickly than they are, for instance, in the institutional business. So when we look at diversity is attracting, inclusion is your retention rate. And if you can't retain people, you probably have, as George pointed out, a structural issue, which could be compensation, but you may actually have insidious practices that are nodding to people about excluding them. And the challenge we're going to have with the new incoming career entrants, they care a lot about purpose. Like, is what I'm doing actually meaningful? Does it make a difference? Now, think about what we do. It is actually incredibly important. Over the last 30 years, most individuals have become entirely responsible for their financial security. And that means our industry has just become so much more important and meaningful. So 2 specific things I think need to happen is, one, the way we describe what we do, the language that we use has to be compelling. Most of our clients don't really understand what we're talking to them about. There's no reason we can't use plain language. So we're going to have to dig deeper into the EQ side, which is not going to be just a relationship. Because one structural component of relationship touch points that's going away is I call you up, my advisor, and I need you to help me do something mundane. It afforded me the opportunity to talk to you as my advisor. That's going away. All of our research shows that people they want a combination of technology, increasingly artificial intelligence, and human intelligence. And so now that relationship is going to be defined differently. And I think that's actually going to challenge almost everybody to think about what their value proposition is to their clients. And when you nail that one down, you're probably going to be able to really attract a different cohort into the business.
Yeah, so speak on that technological change a little bit. So as things are changing, as AI is coming in, as we're getting new systems to automate, how do you think that's going to change like the type of talent we attract?
So I will say that, again, our research shows extensively that we'll be augmenting the activities that people do, and we'll be able to expand what you could imagine that you'll do. So I think about AI in particular probably gives you a 20% efficiency in productivity, just taking away some stuff that, it doesn't add any value and you can do better with technology. Over the next 5 years, I expect AI will require us to rethink just about everything we're doing. So if you can get your individual people 20% productivity, then you get kind of your institutional productivity. But what the stuff we're looking at shows that you're now able to take advantage of business opportunities that you might not have been able to from a cost perspective. So think about understanding risk profiles for your client. That's going to change. And we'll probably use traditional practices that we do right now. But I think more importantly, what AI does is it allows you to imagine things you couldn't even think about up until AI. So how we engage with our clients, how we assess what their objectives are, their risk profiles, and thank goodness this is coming because the markets are likely to be more volatile, more challenged in a higher interest rate, higher inflation environment from the investment side.
George, you want to say anything about the AI?
What I'd add to that is when I think about the AI, and Mark is right about the efficiencies we've already gotten and what we expect to get in the future. But think about how it's going to improve your situation, because something that would have taken me a month to really think about and research and get all the data, if I ask the right question, I can probably get it in a minute or two, and then I have to look at it, I have to reassess it, put it in a format of which I'm going to deliver it to my client or to my boss, whoever that is. But when you think about the next generation, and even the folks that we serve today, regardless of what their age, they're all curious about ChatGPT and AI, so they're beginning to ask questions. And one of the things that I think we have to think about is, okay, if we're doing it to make ourselves more efficient, make ourselves look better, give a better answer, they're actually getting it for information to know what to ask you, what they need help on, and how they're going to make determinations. But at the end of the day, every research that I've seen up to this point still says, after I've done all that, I really like somebody to talk to about before I pull the trigger and make that final decision. So we really have to think about all the efficiencies it gives us, but also think about how your interaction will be both in the terms of the role that you play and then the people that you may be serving, because it's changing. I always tell people, AI is not going to take your job. Somebody who understands AI is going to take your job.
Yeah, so speaking on that, do you think, like, when we are trying to attract talent, given this shift that's going to happen, do you think it's going to be more of even more focus on the behavioral side and the connection side and maybe less on the salesy side? Or what do you think? How does that change when we're trying to, bring people into the industry?
Well, you have a couple of speakers here that I follow that I think are pretty good, and they've managed to do excellent value offering and keep investing in what they're doing and have a very successful business, and I'm sure many of you do. So it's really like, how do you think about this complexity of changing markets? Our clients aren't comparing us to each other in many regards. they'll start to compare us to other services that they're getting that are really delightful and engaging and helping them. And AI will automate, will actually be able, as George said, to help us think really differently about that.
You know, for me, actually, Nick, I think it's a great point from the standpoint of us providing applied financial knowledge for advisors. The area that we have to do more is on the behavioral side. There's a couple of things. Let's just use retirement as an example. I worked 30 years, 40 years, whatever it is. I have my retirement. We got my great plan. We've saved. We have the money. We've even got a distribution strategy. And okay, what else? What am I supposed to do with that? What impact do I want to make when I'm not even working, making an impact? And that's a behavioral issue. That's how I'm thinking psychologically in terms of decisions that I'm making. And when we think of the next generation coming through, they really want to talk about making an impact, bringing value, doing things that are really important, that are purposeful. And that's a behavioral thing. We haven't talked about the money part. We haven't talked about where they want to fit financially. You have to talk to them about where it is they want to go, what they want to do, where they want to have an impact. Then we say, okay, how do we put a plan together that actually gets you there? And I think companies are going to be forced to think that way in terms of what we're seeing with companies and with advisors, is that they're really trying to dig into how do I make your life better by getting to the things that are most important. And now there are people out there that all they want is money. But that's the minority, honestly.
Yeah. I think actually, Nick, what you're seeing too is the nexus of very deep behavioral research coming. You know, if you think about 35 years ago, it was all institutional asset management, and now the individual is so much more important, whether it's defined contribution plans, wealth, you know, that's so much more important. So we have so much more research that helps us understand it. Now we have the technology that will help us capitalize on that. So many of you probably recognize that you bring your own biases to developing plans for clients, the way you interact with them. I can see technology really helping us be much more effective for the client, make us better as advisors, and put together better plans. And at the end of the day, you'll never know as much as your client. Your architects, you know, when somebody describes the building, the house they want, they don't describe, you know, the steel girding in it and the framework. They're really talking about what they aspire to for their families. And I think that's the same for us. The other thing is that education is changing so fast. And so we can train people very young in their careers. And AI, virtual reality in particular, is an amazing tool to help people really deal with difficult decisions. So if you can inform people, you know, train them up on what they need to do, and then simulate those experiences, that 30-year-old all of a sudden becomes much more effective, much more valuable to you as a firm earlier on.
Yeah, so how do we attract that 30-year-old to the industry? I know you talked about language earlier, changing the language and things like that. Do you guys have any other, like, you know, imagine someone here, like, let's say I'm a hiring manager. I'm trying to, what should I be doing? Give me some tact, something I can take home with me that I can think about.
Well, I think the very first thing, I do think language actually really matters. I think actually really digging down to what you're doing. Like, and it takes a lot to think about it. A friend of mine who runs a wealth management firm when she was taking over as CEO, said, I went to 45 firms and went to their websites to see what they do. And in 45 of them, I really couldn't actually understand it. And I had my husband, who's not in the business, look at it, and I couldn't really understand it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think, describing the outcomes. You know, when you're attracting young people, they care a ton about the climate. They have, you know, these are global citizens, even if they've never left wherever they grew up, because they have access to the internet, they have access to information, and now they have extraordinary technology, and they are digital and AI native, the group that's going to come in now. They're using it for everything. And so I think it's, do you have the right technology in place? Do you have the right mindset? Because they want to grow, they want to have purpose and meaning, but they want you to be investing in them, and they want career paths that have success milestones earlier. And that's going to challenge a lot of people in their business structures, back to what George said.
And, you know, the other thing that I would add, because I think she's spot on, is they really do want to see someone that looks like them. And so you put all the things that Mark said, and I agree with every one of them, but you know what? If I don't see a black or a woman or, then I really don't feel that confident that that's actually a place that I want to be at. And so I think we have to, look, even if you got one, you got to put them somewhere so people can see that somebody can make it. And then if you can then tell a story about how you're changing the culture and you want to bring them in, and when you bring them in, you're actually listening to them and then making the adjustments, I think you've got an opportunity for us to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up a good point. Since the beginning of COVID-19, since that happened, there was a big push for DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. So what can we do to kind of keep that momentum going? Like, obviously, a lot's already changed, but, there's probably still a lot more that needs to be done, obviously.
Yeah, we do actually quite a bit in the DEI work for specifically started with the investment management industry. And I would encourage all of you to go to our website. We have a DEI code. The code is very simple. It's quite, it's interesting, but it's really the guidance behind that gives you the practices that you can use for your own business. And it is about what George and I think firmly agree on is on culture. Here in the U.S., it's like woke everything is a contentious issue. I will tell you that we had expected 40 signatories to our DEI code. These are the leading asset management firms. We have over 200. We cover more than 25% of the world's assets under management, and 93% of them are pursuing DEI strategies for business reasons. So I think the mindset is, and George, I love the way you put it. It's about building the best systems and taking away the biases or inherent practices that may be preventing you from being really spectacular. And it does actually have an impact on, we would say, white men, the majority, because not all white men are the same. Imagine that, and in the same as every other diverse group. So it's really actually noticing something in the ecosystem that doesn't make sense, understanding why, and then getting at those practices that impede you from being the best you can be as a firm.
So the two things I'd add is, one, if you're searching, look beyond where you used to search. It's not complicated. As we were going through the George Floyd time, and everybody went to every historically black college and university in America. And look, it's not that many students there. And so I said to them, like, have you ever gone to an inner city urban college like the University of Memphis, University of Cincinnati, places like that? Do you know they got a lot of blacks and Hispanic? Go to University of Houston. You're going to see a whole bunch of kids that are diverse. So you have to stretch and increase where you are searching for in terms of the people. The second thing is, let's understand that DE&I, regardless of the Supreme Court ruling, regardless of wokeism, regardless of all that, DE&I is the most important thing is this inclusion issue that Marge mentioned. But DE&I is more than just black folk. Yeah. And I think sometimes, and what has really caused the issue is we just think it's one group. But it is the Latino population. It is a gender population. It is those who have a sexual orientation population. It is people with a disability. And I think that when we think of the diversity, we have to start talking in a concept that is much broader than just one general group or two general groups, because now it's blacks and women, but it's much broader. And if we then start and expand where we're looking for people and then put them into the system that Mark just mentioned, I think we got a shot at this of making it work.
Yeah, do we have any questions from the Slido? I don't know if we do. We have about a minute left, so I wanted to do that. Or if anyone has a question in the audience, maybe we can run through real quick. If not, do you guys have any closing remarks? Or actually, we do. How will the world of independent advice find a comm structure to train young advisors that can be different from the traditional wirehouse model?
Well, first of all, I actually think you can train. I think the education world is exploding, and of course, we have that. So our CFA program has a pathway now for private wealth. We'll be building it out. So I think there's a way to actually train people differently. The second thing is never underestimate, though, apprenticeship still matters. In-person matters. And so for any of you who have kids that have gone into the workforce while COVID was on, it's a terrible experience if anything of what you're doing requires mentoring, requires apprenticeship. People will model and it doesn't happen all on a Zoom screen. So I think the hybrid workplace, I think, is going to be an interesting challenge, particularly for that younger generation.
I know we got to go. I'll just say this, is that if you would consider bringing people in, giving them a salary, and then putting them as support and exposure to all the aspects of the investment advisor model so they can see what it's like and still get paid, it actually works that they normally will transition into it because it's really part of an apprenticeship program, but you've given them a different environment of which they're learning.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Mark and George. Thank you.